In this episode of Careers That Matter, I'm joined by Wellington Holbrook, who is the CEO of Vancity. Very interesting organization. Welcome.
Really is. Thank you so much, Stu.
So as CEO, what exactly is your job? People go, oh yeah, Chief Executive Officer. But what does that mean, especially at Vancity?
I always presume that a CEO would just have like an easy button and could just do anything they want. But actually, that's not really how it works, sadly.
I think if it's not that easy, it's not that easy, it's not that easy.
Exactly. But I would say, like, fundamentally, the biggest thing that I do in my role is bring people together to solve problems and bring the best people that we can get possibly work with to solve some of the most challenging problems that we're dealing with in society and as a business.
Yeah, that I see as being one of those roles. But you also have to say, okay, what are the issues? Mm-hmm. And so how important is it that you have a grasp on what the organization is about? Yeah. What are the external issues at play like in the marketplace? And how do you align that? And that's when you engage the team to say, okay, let's work this out.
Yeah, right on.
So how much of your time is devoted to that? Okay, how do we do this? How do we do it better? Or how do we meet this new need?
Yeah, I would say that most of my job is actually making sure we have the right people on the job to do exactly that. And obviously, we're scanning the environment, making sure we have a good sense of where things are going. And so we understand where Vancity can actually really leverage its capabilities to make a difference, to build our business, to become more successful as an organization. But what's really interesting about an organization like Vancity, it's hard to run a business. It's even harder and more challenging to run a business when you're in the business of making profit, but you're also in the business of actually improving the lives of people. And we're both. And these things aren't mutually exclusive. And actually, they become a very, I'd say, a synergistic approach to doing business. But you got to consistently do it every day. And that's what makes it really, really hard. How
many people on your team, that are direct reports to you?
Yeah, I think I have 9 or 10 direct reports and a great team, mostly assembled over the last 2.5 years. And a very diverse team that is bringing so many great ideas to Vancity. And I'd say there's a bit of a renaissance happening in the organization right now that is really exciting to be a part of.
So is that a day-to-day engagement, or is it you're interacting with them, but they have an assignment and off they go and report back to you on some kind of schedule?
Yeah, we work pretty closely together because there's no problems that you can solve by yourself, and there's just no such thing. But whether it's our Chief Technology Officer who is building out our technology roadmap to make sure we can deliver on the capabilities we need, whether you're leading our member experience division, which is really about making sure we have the right products and services and putting the right thought into what our members are going to need in the future, whether you're running the lines of business where you're really hyper-focused on the needs of our members. Everybody has a little bit of a different vantage point, and when you bring a group like that together, it's pretty powerful when you have a great team dynamic, which I feel so fortunate we've been building.
So when you bring them together as for a meeting, how long do those meetings usually go?
Literally, I was in one right before joining you here today, Stu, and we typically meet 3 hours every Wednesday. It's not rocket science by any means, but we just have real conversations. The goal isn't consensus. The goal is really talking through issues so we understand all the potential dynamics that go into any decision, and make the best decision we can. And often there's consensus, but there isn't always consensus because these issues are complicated that we're trying to solve.
So that's the collective, the team and you.
Yeah.
But when it turns to your reporting to a board, it's you.
Yes.
And you have to carry, there's the responsibility that you go, it's the team, but ultimately the responsibility rests on you. And you have that outward facing to the board. That's an important part of your job as well.
It really is, and I would say it's also it's a challenging thing reporting to a board because you're reporting to 9 folks, often with different perspectives and views too. And I would say I've met a lot of CEOs in my time who think their job is to convince the board of the right decision, and sometimes it is that. But actually, it's using the board and the life experiences that they bring and the different perspectives they have to inform the decisions that we need to make as an organization. When you get that balance right, it actually makes the organization stronger. it is one of the reasons I really do think credit unions are special, because it's our membership who elect our board. So like they're really representatives of the views of our members, and that helps us become a better member-focused organization.
You also have a responsibility for community engagement. How much of your time is devoted to that?
Trying to spend about 30%, 30 to 40%, but 30% is probably what I'm successfully doing today. And whether it's celebrating David Suzuki's 90th birthday, which is the fun kind of side of that, or opening a new branch like we did in Burke-Whitlam a few weeks ago. Often it's in meetings with folks who are at the Board of Trade or in community roles across the province or country for that matter. It's about 30% of my time, and it's a lot of fun. Like that's the fun part of my job, to be completely frank.
Well, there's one other element of that outward-facing part, and that is that you are the face. And so therefore, at times, you're going to be doing interviews like this or others.
Yeah.
And that must take up a certain amount of your time, because it's not just talking. You also have to go through the prep to be able to do that in a way that is an accurate reflection of the organization.
You're totally right. I think that's one of the things that make regional financial institutions like Vancity really, really special. Like, we are here in community. I can go downtown and have a meeting with someone here in Vancouver. The reality for most of the banks is they're not based here. It would be very unusual to see a CEO or an executive, for that matter, from some of those big banks attend the meetings. So I think there's almost a responsibility that we're in those conversations. But I think it's what makes us locally relevant, is that we are in the conversation. We know what happens on Main Street or Commercial Drive. Like we're here.
Yeah. Okay, so there's all these different parts. 30% of this, 3 hours a week on that. And so when you add it all up, how many hours a week are you working?
Well, okay, so I know you want to talk about careers. I'm not going to lie to anybody. If you're thinking a CEO job would be a great place to go and read the newspaper, put your feet up and take it easy. And does anybody read newspapers anymore? Actually, I think because we consume our digital, consume our digital news. It's certainly not that. Like, it is a 7-day-a-week kind of role, and I love it. Like, I wouldn't want it any other way. I love what I do. Actually, people often ask me what my hobby is. Like, I have hobbies, but I love what I do at work. Like, this is fun, and if you don't think it's fun, you shouldn't be doing it.
Well, that is one of the elements of it, isn't it? If you want to be a high achiever, you have to enjoy the work
100%.
And be prepared to put in a lot of hours. But you have a family.
Yes.
And so how do you find the balance there?
At this point in my life, I'm fortunate. I have two amazing daughters, but they're young adults. My youngest actually is turning 21 in a few days. My oldest is 22, almost 23. And they're pretty independent, and they make life pretty easy. So it's really just me, my wife, and my dog, Fred. So that's where my time outside of work is spent. Yeah. But the reality is, it's time consuming. And you don't know when it's going to hit you either, right? Like when a crisis is going to happen, or there's an issue, or something, the wheels fall off of something, you've got to be ready to respond anytime. And again, I enjoy those moments because it is actually kind of exciting and thrilling. It's often scary, and there's a reason I have so much white hair. I'll just put it that way. But it's what makes the experience so special, I think, too.
Okay, let's rewind the clock a little bit. You're graduating from high school. Yeah. Where'd you go to high school, and what were you thinking you were going to do as you walked out of that secondary institution?
It's funny you ask, but I went to a school called Collège Béliveau.
What was it called?
Collège Béliveau. It was a French high school in Winnipeg, St. Boniface, actually. My mother's French Canadian and from French heritage, so I got educated in French. But I will tell you this, is if there was one thing I had a certainty about, was I was never going to work in the industry of banking. In fact, I didn't know what I was going to do, but I was never going to do that.
You knew you weren't going to do that.
That's right, 30 years later of doing it.
Why were you adamant that you weren't going to do it?
My mother was an entrepreneur. She ran a business for 32 or 34 years. And it's tough. But the worst day of the year was the day the banker came to visit and would basically tell her why all her ambitions for her business weren't going to come true. And my father worked for a bank. And he really didn't like his job. Like I say this kind of in jest, but it's actually kind of true. I remember the first happy moments where my father was really happy was the days after he left a 25-year career at one of the banks. And I don't think it's that the banks were bad. It's just,
Yeah.
it just didn't seem like a very appealing place to work for me. I grew this chip on my shoulder and it grew and it grew and it grew. And I started naively as a younger person thinking banking doesn't have to be like that. It can be better. And I remember seeing a speech of a bank executive who worked for a bank early in my career. I worked for a Business Development Bank of Canada, who had said they wanted to be the R&D arm for banking in Canada to do things differently and serving small business and entrepreneurs at the time. That got me going. I was like, I'm in. I want to change banking. And I've been literally on a 30-year journey to do that.
Okay, so what did you went to university then?
Yes,
didn't
I
you?
did.
And what did you study?
Business at the University of Manitoba. I studied commerce. I graduated with my Bachelor of Commerce. Later on, I did my master's at Oxford University, which was one of the great privileges of my life, actually.
You leave Oxford, where'd you go to? Because it sounds like it wasn't too long before you actually did get drawn into banking.
So literally graduated with my undergrad at the University of Manitoba, started working at BDC within a few months of that.
And, very institution or sector that you said, no.
Well, BDC was a special place, actually, and I was very fortunate to get it was an incredible investment in my education, working there, because they have a chip on their shoulder. They did. I haven't been there in a long time. So, yeah. But at the time, it just really felt like they were looking for ways to do things differently. And that, by the way, I heard of Vancity a long, long time ago, because it was always this organization that was on the cutting edge of pushing the edges and pushing the boundaries to be more inclusive, to solve more problems, to do things other banks wouldn't do. And so it's funny, not to fast forward to Vancity by any means, but over my career working at 3 other financial institutions, I always had my line of sight at Vancity, and I can't tell you how happy, fortunate, privileged, lucky I feel to be here in the very organization that inspired me for so many years.
How many years were you at BDC?
I was at BDC for 15. I spent another decade at ATB Financial, which I also enjoyed very much.
And then?
And then I spent a few years at Connect First Credit Union before it merged with Service Credit Union in Alberta, and had a small stint at an advisory company, Gartner global company. But Vancity called, and I was like, Vancity's calling? Like, what, they're calling me? And I remember going to the first meeting with Vancity.
Did you just answer the phone and say, whatever it is, yes?
Almost. I remember going to the first interview when they were recruiting for the CEO role. And I was like, oh, they're never going to hire me. But I was just thrilled to be a part of it. And then I got invited to the second, and I remember thinking, oh, they're never going to hire me. Third one, and before you know it, I'm working here, and I'm literally in my dream job.
The audience that I hope benefits the most from this series about Careers That Matter are young people who are looking at the road ahead of them.
Yeah.
When you look at your own career progression, what's the thing that you've discovered about yourself that played a fundamental role in your ability to continue to grow within the sector?
Yeah. Really great question in terms of I would have to say is, as a younger person, I think I had a lot of big ideas and thought I kind of had it figured out. It's probably some early failures or situations where I was humbled and realized I'm not going to be the smartest person in the room. I remember at one point in my career, I'd taken a transfer to Toronto. I was working there, the center of the banking universe, as some folks there start to believe. I started to believe it when I lived there for a few years. You don't kind of sober up from that until you get out of that environment. But I remember some of the smartest people I've ever worked with in financial services in that market, and realized I'm not going to be the smartest person in the room. I can be somebody who brings the smartest people together. I can be someone who creates an environment where smart people working together solve real problems. And those were probably the most important learnings of my entire career.
Yeah. Perry Bellegarde, when he was the National Chief of the Assembly of First Nations, I had him in here for a conversation. And he said something that sort of echoes a little bit about what you're saying. It's all about relationships. And you are talking about the fact, your ability to build relationships, because he said, if you can't build relationships, can't build anything.
I agree with that. I've met so many smart, brilliant, incredible people trying to change the world, but thinking they're the smartest person in the world. And unfortunately, if you get stuck in that dynamic, it's really hard, really, really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Less hubris, more humility.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
true. Thank you very much. Thanks for giving us a
Stu,
glimpse into your
grateful.
current job and your path to get there.
Thank you, Stu.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Anthony Origanello, CEO of the Chartered Professionals in Human Resources for BC and Yukon. We represent more than 8,000 members, and as the organization dedicated to advancing the HR profession through education, advocacy, awareness, professional development, as well as our recognized and impactful CPHR designation, we are proud to be a sponsor of this show. We have been the voice of the HR profession since 1942. Learn more about us at cphrbc.ca.